Hey everyone, I'm David Aragona for another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. Four prep races taking place around the country this weekend, offering Kentucky Derby qualifying points. And I think the one that features the most star power, at least among the favorite, is race 12 at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. That, of course, is the Grade 3 Holy Bull going a mile and a 16th on the main track. And this one is going to feature a heavy favorite, the leading contender for the Kentucky Derby right now. And that is the number 7 Fierceness as we throw up the field for this race. Haven't yet seen the Morning Lion, but I've got to imagine that this horse is going to be a heavy favorite in this spot. He, of course, is the recently crowned 2-year-old champion at the Eclipse Awards from last season, the impressive winner of last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And Todd Pletcher is kicking off his 3-year-old campaign fairly early in early February for this Holy Bull Stakes. And he just looks like he is the fastest on the weigh-in based on speed figures, class lines. Very much the horse to beat in this spot. Let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector to get a sense of where Fierceness might be placed in the early stages of this race. And as you can see here, the TimeformUS pace projector shows him on the front end, and that does seem like a real possibility. Fierceness is not a horse that necessarily needs to be on the front end all by himself. We saw that in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last time. He is capable of stalking the pace, passing another rival, but it seems like a few of them that are drawn inside of him, they're not necessarily confirmed frontrunners. I suppose a horse like the number 1 Hades could get aggressive after he led in a 1-turn 7 furlong race last time. Inveigled has shown some speed on occasion. C Streak, hard to see him clearing Fierceness to the outside of that rival, but he also possesses some tactical speed. But I wouldn't be surprised if John Velasquez does not want to mess around on Fierceness and just sends him forward into that clubhouse turn, especially with the turn coming up so quickly, going this mile and the 16th distance at Gulfstream Park. Let's go through this field in post-position order. We'll begin with the number 1 Hades, and we'll take a look at his most recent start at Gulfstream Park on New Year's Eve. This was actually December 31st, an allowance race for the Florida breds going 7 furlongs. And I really liked the progression this horse showed from start 1 to start 2, improved tactical speed after he was a closing winner on debut. This day, he went to the front end and just widened through the stretch. He, on his in his debut race, had hung on his left lead while making that closing run. In this race, it was encouraging to see him change leads on cue. And when he changed leads, he really spurted away from the field through the stretch, seemingly getting a burst of energy after he did that. So good signs with a horse that's progressing mentally from the first start to the second start. He's going to need another step forward to be competitive with a favorite like Fierceness in this race, but he did earn a 100 TimeformUS speed figure last time. That was a race that you can see gets the B notation in TimeformUS, indicating that it was broken out from some other races on the day. I believe that was a race that arguably could have come up even faster, but I think a very fast number might not have made sense for other horses in that field. Hades definitely bred to get some added ground, especially on the dam side. He's a half to a route winner, so would not be surprised if this horse is another step forward in him, but he is facing off against a pretty formidable foe in that favorite that we'll get to in just a little bit. Number 2 is Inveigled. He is one of the few horses coming out of the Macho Man Stakes, was actually beaten by a couple of rivals that he'll be facing off against here in Otello and C Streak, who we'll get to in just a little bit. I didn't feel that Inveigled had a major excuse last time. He got a pretty good trip stalking the pace and just didn't really have that much punch through the stretch that day. Really turning the tables on him from the prior start was C Streak, who he had easily defeated at an optional claiming race back in December at Gulfstream Park. And Inveigled just didn't appear to be as sharp at any point of the Macho Man Stakes last time. So he's going to have to get back on track and continue building on that momentum that we had seen from him 2 and 3 starts back when he was running TimeformUS speed figures of 106 and 108 that behind Fierceness make him one of the fastest runners in this field, but a little hard to like off the last race. We'll see if he can bounce back in this spot. Notably, Irad Ortiz does retain the mount on him, and he did pilot him in those last couple of races. The number 3 Otello was the winner of the Macho Man, and we'll take a look at the replay of that race right now. And Otello showed a lot of likable attributes in this race, stalking in behind the leaders, encounters a little bit of traffic as he's trying to angle out an upper stretch here, but ultimately does get into the clear. And once he sees that daylight, he accelerates, is able to run on by the leaders, and ultimately wins this race fairly comfortably, despite that half-length margin of victory. I think the big question with Otello is, can he run a faster race? Because this was actually a slight step backwards for him him from a speed figure standpoint after running a faster 105 Timeform US speed figure on debut. The Mucho Macho Man, just not a fast race overall. He did run well on debut, a very similar kind of trip to what we saw in the Mucho Macho Man, where he again was locked in behind horses in traffic and sort of had to bull his way out to find some clear sailing in the stretch that day. Even though that debut race did get a higher speed figure, we have seen a few runners come back out of that race and regress in subsequent starts. So I question the validity of that number a little bit. And I just think it hammers home the fact that Otello's going to have to get faster if he proves to be a significant rival to the favorite. And it does feel like there's a good chance that he is the second choice in the wagering here. The number 4 is Dancing Groom, and he's one that's going to hope that the pace comes back a little bit because he is just a closing type. We saw him rally from off the pace to break his maiden in an off-the-turf event at Saratoga last summer. Put in a pretty good effort to be third in the Champagne after that. Obviously, just picking up the pieces that day over a tiring, sloppy track, but he did finish ahead of Fierceness on that occasion. Obviously, that was not the version of Fierceness that we saw in his two surrounding starts. Last time out, though, that's kind of the problem race for Dancing Groom. He really did not show up with a competitive effort in the Kentucky Jockey Club. The pace of that race maybe didn't suit him. You see that blue color coded Timeform US pace figure, but the winner, Anna Marie, did rally from off the pace, so can't hold it against Dancing Groom too much that the pace was not in his favor, or rather you can hold it against him. And I just think that Dancing Groom's going to need to take a big step forward in here. We'll see if the pace comes back. The connections are adding blinkers this day, maybe an attempt to keep him a little bit closer to the pace early, but he is another that's going to need a big step forward from a speed figure standpoint. The number 5 is No More Time. He was actually one of the favorites in the Mucho Macho Man last time, but finished 5th behind 3 other rivals that he'll be meeting in this spot. He did not quite run back to his impressive maiden victory, 2 back at Gulfstream Park, was a commanding winner that day by nearly 7 lengths. That 104 final Timeform US speed figure, it does stack up against these. Obviously got a slight downgrade that day to the 99 for the slow pace that he was able to set. And it makes you wonder if this horse does need that kind of trip sitting on top of a slow pace. Last time out, the trip did not work out nearly as well. He hopped at the start, was off towards the back of the pack, had to play catch up throughout, did make a middle move around the far turn while racing wide to get back into contention, but then flattened out towards the later stages of that race. Perhaps the trip, without that kind of trip, he might have been able to achieve a better result, but still, I'm not sure that you really want anybody out of the Mucho Macho Man, just given the fact that it was a race that did not earn a very high speed figure, and I think all of them are going to need to really step up their game facing tougher in this Holy Bull. Up next is the number 6 Domestic Product. We'll take a look at his last victory. This was 2 back when he broke his maiden at the Belmont at the Big A meet at Aqueduct, going the 2-turn 9 furlong distance, and he actually tried the 9 furlongs again last time in the Remsen, so he is one of the few that's actually going to be turning back in distance to the mile and a 16th in this Holy Bull Stakes. This was a visually impressive victory when he broke his maiden in this spot. He beat what looked like a decent field at the time, just was not able to cope with a tougher assignment next time in the Remsen, also racing over a muddy sealed track that day. Maybe that didn't really agree with him because he got a pretty good trip considering the way the track was playing at Aqueduct on December 2nd. He was saving ground for most of the way. You wanted to be towards the inside over that track on Cigar Mile Day, and he just had nothing left of the stretch. You could see he was in the mix until the 8th pole and then just really shut down the final furlong, as a lot of runners did. Most of them could not keep pace with those top 2 at the end of the Remsen. So Domestic Product's going to have to bounce back in this spot, but I like the slight turn back in distance for him. He's taking the blinkers off this time, and I think that's going to be the right kind of move for a horse who tended to get a little bit rank in the last 2 starts. I think the slower paces of those 9 furlong events just made him get a little bit too keen in the early stages, so maybe he won't show that tendency with the blinkers coming off in this Holy Bull. Up next is the likely heavy favorite. That is the number 7 Fierceness, and he is just way the horse to beat off this performance that we're looking at. This is that smashing almost 7-length victory in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile from last year, earning a 121 Timeform US speed figure, building on that 114 Timeform US speed figure that he had earned on debut. Obviously, we did not see the best version of this horse in the Champagne, whether it was the slightly awkward start, him being out of position in that race, or the sloppy track that he just did not handle as well as he did a muddy track on debut at Saratoga. I think he proved that the real version of fierceness is the one that we saw last time in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile, where he just easily defeated the best horses in this division, the likes of Muth and Locked, major players on the Kentucky Derby Trail. At least we tend to expect to see Locked in that position later in the year. And fierceness just handled them with ease. The 121 Timeform US speed figure, it stands up to scrutiny. Other horses who finished behind him had already run similar numbers. Watching his workouts coming back for this race, I would be pretty confident that we're going to see a good effort out of fierceness. He had a workout that was in company with his stablemate Locked back on January 13th. It was going better than that foe. Worked in company with the impressive debut winner Born Noble back on January 20th. Again, looked best in workouts with that one runner, and just seems like fierceness is really thriving ahead of his 3-year-old debut and seems very likely to be able to handle this field. And we'll see how he progresses down the Derby trail from here, but this seems like the right kind of spot in which to bring him back. And then finally is the number 8 C Streak. He is another runner coming out of that Mucho Macho Man Stakes. This is an overachieving New Jersey bred son of Sea Wizard. He's really just a cool story for the connections based on the sire and the pedigree. A trainer that doesn't have a lot of top horses, a sire that hasn't sired many top horses or really many runners at all. And he's running on the Kentucky Derby Trail right now. He was game last time in that Mucho Macho Man, contesting the pace, and looks like he might fade and get nothing at the top of the stretch, but continued to battle on all the way to the wire. I personally am not convinced that this is a horse that necessarily gets better with added distance. So I think that the stretch out to 2 turns is going to be a big question mark for him, especially trying to get forward position racing outside of fierceness. Could have the most difficult trip of all heading into that clubhouse turn. So definitely some hurdles for C Streak to overcome. But like I said, he's an overachieving runner who's probably will be a decent price in this race. Well, we'll throw up my picks for this Holy Bull, and I'll be honest, it's not a race that I'm really looking forward to betting. Fierceness just figures to be a heavy favorite in this one, and I'm not trying to beat him. The one horse that I'm somewhat interested in underneath would be the number 1 Hades. I just thought he took a nice step forward last time in his second start, really showing a lot of professionalism, gaining that experience from his debut. So I think the added distance could work for him. Unfortunately, he's just running into potentially the best 3-year-old in this crop in fierceness. So my play, if there is one, would be the exacta with Hades under fierceness, but not trying to beat the heavy favorite in this Holy Bull on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.